True story, my ungrateful son kicked me out. Then he learned my hidden inheritance. Have you ever looked at someone you loved more than life itself, and realized they saw you as nothing more than a means to an end? As a bottomless well, to be drawn from until dry? I have, my dears. Oh, I have. And that feeling, that gut-wrenching, soul-crushing feeling, taught me the biggest lesson of my life. It taught me that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them fall, to let them truly, unequivocally, stand on their own 2 feet. Even if those feet belong to your own flesh and blood. You know, I never thought it would come to this. Never in a million years did I imagine my golden years would be defined by such a profound betrayal. But life, as they say, has a funny way of surprising you. And sometimes, those surprises are wrapped in the most painful of packages, forcing you to confront truths you'd rather keep buried. It was a Tuesday, a perfectly ordinary Tuesday, if such a thing exists anymore, though looking back, perhaps no day is truly ordinary when it holds the cusp of such profound change. The kind of day where the sun was shining with a gentle warmth, filtering through the ancient oak trees that graced our property, and the birds were singing their cheerful, oblivious melodies. I was, for once, feeling quite peaceful in my cherished ancestral home. This house, you see, was more than just bricks and mortar, it was my sanctuary, a living, breathing testament to a life well lived. It was where my husband, Thomas, and I had built our lives, raised our son, Dorian, and nurtured countless dreams. Every creak in the old floorboards whispered a memory, Thomas chasing a young Dorian down the hallway, the echo of laughter from long-ago dinner parties, the quiet hum of our shared existence. Every rose in the sprawling garden, meticulously tended by my hands and those of our beloved gardener, held a whispered secret, a moment of joy or quiet contemplation. I was sitting in the conservatory, a sun-drenched haven filled with the scent of jasmine and old books, sipping my herbal tea from a delicate porcelain cup Thomas had brought back from a trip to Kyoto years ago. The morning light filtered through the magnificent stained-glass window that Thomas had painstakingly restored himself, casting jewel-toned patterns across the worn Persian rug. I was admiring the play of light, lost in a pleasant reverie of gratitude and contentment, when the doorbell rang. It wasn't a cheerful, friendly chime, mind you. More of a demanding, insistent buzz, sharp and intrusive. My peaceful bubble burst instantly. I knew immediately, with a certainty born of long experience, it was Dorian and his wife, Xantha. They rarely visited unannounced, unless they needed something. And lately, it always felt like they needed something. Always. A familiar, weary sigh escaped my lips, almost imperceptible. I braced myself, a subtle tightening in my chest, a quiet steeling of my resolve, as I made my way to the heavy oak front door. I opened the door to their usual flurry of forced smiles and air kisses. Xantha, as always, was impeccably dressed, a vision in tailored silk and expensive jewelry, her designer handbag, a limited edition piece I recognized from a recent magazine spread, clutched tight as if it were a shield. Her eyes, though, were already scanning the interior of my home, a flicker of calculation in their depths that I had come to know all too well. Dorian, looking as though he'd just rolled out of bed despite it being almost noon, had that familiar, slightly shifty look in his eyes, a blend of impatience and feigned nonchalance. "Mother, darling," Xantha chirped, her voice a little too high, a little too saccharine, as she stepped past me before I'd even fully opened the door. Her perfume, heady and expensive, preceded her, filling the usually quiet foyer. "Such a lovely day, isn't it? We just thought we'd pop by, see how you are." Her words were a performance, a well-rehearsed charade. "I'm quite well, thank you, Xantha," I said, trying to keep my voice even, a delicate balance of politeness and underlying caution. "And you? Dorian?" Dorian just grunted, already making a beeline for the antique mahogany desk in the study, where I kept my papers, my financial records, my life. My heart sank, a heavy stone dropping in my stomach. This wasn't a social call. This was never a social call anymore. "Mother," Dorian began, turning back to me, holding a thick folder, a manila envelope bursting with documents. His tone was abrupt, lacking any of Xantha's superficial charm. We have something important to discuss. It's about your living situation. My living situation? I looked around my home, the home I'd lived in for over 50 years, the very walls imbued with the memories of my life, my love, my losses. What was there to discuss? It was a ludicrous notion. Xantha, ever the smooth operator, sensing Dorian's bluntness might derail their carefully constructed plan, took over. She moved with a predatory grace, settling herself on the edge of a delicate antique chair, though she didn't fully sit. You see, Elara, darling, she began, her voice dripping with artificial concern, Dorian and I have been doing a lot of thinking. About your future. Your security. This house, it's just so much, isn't it? So many stairs. So much upkeep. It's simply not practical for someone your age. She gestured vaguely around the spacious living room, as if it were a burden, not a blessing. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine, a chilling premonition that settled deep in my bones. I manage perfectly well, Xantha. I have my gardener, Mr. Peterson, who has been with us for 30 years, and my cleaner, Mrs. Davies, who knows every nook and cranny. And I enjoy the space. It is my home. But do you truly? Dorian interjected, finally looking me in the eye, though his gaze was oddly detached, almost clinical. We're worried about you, Mother. Really? What if you fall? What if something happens? We wouldn't be able to live with ourselves. It was a performance, and a poor one at that. Their words were hollow, ringing false in my ears. They weren't worried about me, they were worried about my assets. This house, vast and historic, sat on prime land, its value skyrocketing with each passing year. I knew, deep down, what this was about. The scent of greed was palpable in the air, overpowering the sweet jasmine. So, Xantha continued, oblivious or indifferent to my growing dismay, opening the folder with a flourish, we found the most delightful place for you. It's an assisted living community, Evergreen Estates, just outside of town. Brand new, very modern. All your needs taken care of. Gourmet meals, social activities, 24/7 nursing staff. And, she paused, her voice taking on a saccharine sweetness that made my teeth ache, it's much smaller. Cozier, really. Just a charming little one-bedroom apartment. Perfect for you. She pushed a glossy brochure into my hands. The images inside showed sterile, brightly lit hallways, a communal dining room that looked like a cafeteria, and indeed, a tiny, clinical apartment that looked nothing like a home. It was miles away from my friends, my longtime doctor, my entire life, my memories. It was a prison, beautifully packaged. And, Dorian chimed in, pointing to some papers in the folder, his voice laced with an eager anticipation that confirmed my worst fears, we've already put down a deposit. Just a small one, you know, to secure your spot. And we've taken the liberty of drawing up the papers for the sale of this house. He gestured around with an almost proprietary air. The market's excellent right now, Mother. We could get a truly fantastic sum for it. It's all here, ready for your signature. I stared at the documents, then at them. My son, my only child, and his wife, standing in my home, calmly telling me they had already decided my future, made arrangements to sell my property, and move me into a tiny box miles away. Without a single discussion, a single question about what I wanted. The audacity was breathtaking. You've already done this? My voice was barely a whisper, a strained sound I barely recognized as my own. My hands trembled as I gripped the glossy brochure, the corners digging into my palms. Well, yes, Mother, Dorian said, sounding almost impatient, as if I were being unreasonable. It just made sense. It's for your own good, truly. And the sooner we list this place, the better. We'll have a moving company here by the end of the month. You'll be settled in your new place before you know it. A moving company. End of the month. They weren't asking, they were telling. They weren't suggesting, they were ordering. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, punctuated only by the frantic beating of my own heart. My mind reeled, a whirlwind of disbelief, hurt, and a simmering, unfamiliar anger. The sheer audacity, the callous disregard for my feelings, my wishes, my very dignity, it was a physical blow, a punch to the gut. It wasn't just about the house, it was about the utter lack of respect. The complete and total dismissal of me as a person. They saw me as an obstacle, a hurdle to be cleared so they could get their hands on what they considered their inheritance. I looked from Dorian's impatient, slightly shifty face to Xanda's expectant, almost gleeful smile. And in that moment, something shifted within me. A profound, irreversible change. The decades of quiet resentment, the suppressed hurt, the countless times I had bitten my tongue and given in, hoping for a flicker of genuine affection or appreciation, it all coalesced into a single, blazing certainty. This was it. The absolute, undeniable, final straw. My illusions shattered like fine crystal, fragments of a broken dream scattering around me. Without another word, without a tear or a shout, I calmly folded the brochure, its glossy surface mocking me, and placed it back on the desk. I looked at my son, truly looked at him, and saw a stranger. The boy I had raised, the man I had loved and supported, was gone, replaced by a calculating, entitled figure I barely recognized. So, how did we get here, you ask? How did a mother and son, once so close, reach such a desolate crossroads? It wasn't an overnight thing, my dear. Oh no, it was a slow, insidious erosion, like water wearing away stone, drip by painful drip over many, many years. The ground beneath me had been crumbling for decades, and I, foolishly, had pretended not to notice. You see, my late husband, Thomas, was a visionary. He was one of those quiet geniuses who saw the future before anyone else did, with an almost uncanny foresight. He founded a tech company back when computers were still massive, clunky machines, filling entire rooms, and he built it, through sheer brilliance, relentless dedication, and an unwavering work ethic, into a global empire. He was a man of integrity, deeply principled, and he believed in earning your way. When he passed, far too young, leaving a void that never truly filled, he left me with a vast fortune, more money than I could ever spend in several lifetimes. And, crucially, he left me with complete control over it all. He trusted me implicitly. He knew I would be sensible, that I would manage it for our family, and that I would ensure our son, Dorian, was always well taken care of, but also, and this was key to Thomas, that he would learn the value of hard work, that he would understand the dignity of earning one's own way in the world. That was the plan, anyway. A plan that, tragically, went awry. But Dorian, well, Dorian never quite inherited his father's drive. Or his humility. He was always a charming boy, I'll give him that. He knew how to flash that dimpled smile, how to turn on the puppy dog eyes when he wanted something. As a child, it was endearing. As an adult, it became a weapon. When Thomas passed, Dorian was still in college, barely scraping by, more interested in parties and leisure than academics. He hated studying, hated working. He saw the wealth as his birthright, a golden ticket that meant he never had to truly exert himself. And I, in my overwhelming grief, my profound loneliness, and my desperate desire to make sure my only son was happy, made the mistake of enabling him. I wanted to protect him from the harshness of the world, from the struggles Thomas had faced. I wanted him to be happy, even if it meant sacrificing a piece of myself. It started small, you know. A little extra allowance for rent, because the city was so expensive, mother. A new car when his old one broke down, though I suspected he just wanted something flashier, something that would impress his friends. Then came Xanda. Oh, Xanda. She was beautiful, vivacious, with a dazzling smile that could charm anyone. And she was utterly captivating to Dorian, a whirlwind of ambition and social aspiration. And she was also, how shall I put this kindly, very, very ambitious. She saw the fortune, too. She saw it as her golden ticket, her shortcut to the life she believed she deserved. Their wedding, for instance. A lavish affair, far beyond what Dorian, who had yet to hold down a job for more than 6 months, could possibly afford. A destination wedding in Tuscany, with hundreds of guests, flown in from around the globe. I paid for it all. Every last detail, from the imported flowers flown in from Holland to the 6-tier cake, from the bespoke designer gowns Xanda wore to their exorbitant honeymoon in the Maldives, where they rented a private overwater bungalow. Did they offer to contribute? Not a peep. They just smiled and accepted, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if it were their due. I remember Xanda remarking at the reception, "Oh, Alara, you've always been so generous. What would we do without you?" It wasn't a question of gratitude, but a statement of expectation. Then came the house. Not just any house, mind you. A sprawling, 5-bedroom estate in the most exclusive part of town, with a swimming pool, a tennis court, and a separate guesthouse. Dorian wanted to make a statement, he said, to show the world he was successful, even though he wasn't. Xanda wanted to entertain properly, to host charity galas and impress her new social circle. They couldn't afford the mortgage, of course, not on Dorian's sporadic, fleeting income. So, I paid the down payment, a staggering sum that depleted a significant portion of my liquid assets. And then, when they struggled with the monthly payments, I quietly, week after week, month after month, transferred the funds to cover their mortgage. For years, I did this. Years. They never even acknowledged it. It simply became an expectation, a silent, invisible lifeline they never questioned. I felt like a secret bank, accessible only to them, my resources their unquestioned right. Oh, the cars. Dorian always had to have the latest model, the fastest, the most luxurious. A new sports car every 2 years, a high-end SUV for Xanda that reflected their status. He'd simply send me the invoice, or mention offhand, "Oh, my car's getting old, mother. I'm thinking of upgrading to the new Porsche. It's truly magnificent." And I would pay. They never once thought to question where the money came from, or how I managed it. They simply brought me the invoices, or the dealership calls would come to me directly for payment confirmation. And the grandchildren, my precious grandchildren, bless their little hearts. I adore them, truly. They are the only pure joy I had left in that tangled web, the only reason I continued to endure. But Dorian and Xanda insisted they attend the most elite, most expensive private schools, institutions with tuition fees that rivaled a small country's GDP. For their future, mother, they'd declare, as if they were making some grand sacrifice, as if their own children's education was somehow my sole responsibility. Of course, the tuition bills landed squarely on my desk. Every single term. Plus the extracurriculars, the summer sports camps in Europe, the foreign language tutors, the private music lessons, the elite university applications coaching, everything. My grandchildren were clothed in designer outfits from boutiques I couldn't even pronounce, taken on exotic vacations to places like Monaco and St. Bart's, had every whim indulged, all thanks to my late husband's hard work, and my continued, foolish generosity. I tried, you know. I really did. I tried to talk to Dorian about financial responsibility. About finding a meaningful career, something that would give him purpose beyond spending. He'd just wave his hand dismissively. "Mother, we're fine. You worry too much. It's all taken care of." Meaning, I would take care of it. He'd often say, Father wanted me to enjoy life, not be bogged down by work like he was. He completely missed the point that Thomas enjoyed his work, that it was his passion, his creation. Xanda was worse. She'd openly discuss my finances with Dorian right in front of me, as if I were a deaf old woman, a relic to be managed. "When will Alara get rid of that old Picasso? It's worth a fortune. We could do so much with that." Or, "Do you think Mother will upgrade her car soon? We could really use the older one for the nanny, instead of buying another." And the inheritance, oh, the inheritance was a constant topic of conversation. Not in terms of providing for me in my old age, but in terms of what they would do with it. They would talk about grand schemes, risky investments, buying more property, launching a new, extravagant business venture, all of it predicated on my eventual demise. It was as if I were already gone, a ghost haunting my own living room. And the disrespect. They would frequently forget to invite me to family events, to their children's school plays, to holiday dinners. Then, when I'd call, hurt, they'd feign surprise. "Oh, Mother, we just assumed you wouldn't want to come. You always say you're tired." Or, "It was just a small, intimate gathering, really. Nothing you'd enjoy." It was a constant barrage of subtle, and not so subtle, dismissals. My old-fashioned ways were often the butt of their jokes. My advice, always ignored. My presence, tolerated at best, an inconvenience at worst. I felt like an ATM that occasionally spoke, and they merely tolerated the inconvenient sounds. I remember one Christmas, they invited me to their house for dinner. I arrived with gifts for everyone, including a carefully chosen, handmade merino wool sweater for Dorian, knitted by a local artisan, and a rare vintage sapphire brooch for Xantha, something I knew she had admired in a catalogue. They were already seated at the dining table, their friends over, laughing raucously, bottles of expensive champagne open. Xantha barely looked up when I entered, offering a quick, distracted wave. Dorian gave me a distracted nod from across the table, his eyes already back on his conversation. As the evening progressed, I found myself isolated, sitting alone at the end of the long, grand dining table while they regaled their friends with stories of their latest luxury cruise, paid for by me, of course, and their plans for a new wing on their house. I heard Xantha loudly whisper to a friend, "Honestly, Alara's just so set in her ways. We've tried to get her to downsize for years, but she just clings to that old mansion. Such a waste of potential." It stung, you know? It truly stung. To be spoken about as if I weren't even there, as if I were some inanimate object holding them back from their grander plans, a mere impediment to their limitless desires. I kept quiet, always. I convinced myself that this was just how modern families were. That their love was simply expressed differently, less overtly. That my financial support was a bridge to a closer connection, a way to show my love, to make sure they never suffered, never wanted for anything, unlike the early struggles Thomas and I had faced. Oh, what a fool I was. I hoped that if I just kept giving, kept supporting, kept being there, they would eventually see my worth beyond the money. That they would appreciate the sacrifices, the love behind the endless checks, the tireless management of Thomas's legacy. But it never happened. My giving only seemed to fuel their entitlement. My quietness was mistaken for weakness. And my love, well, my love was simply consumed, never reciprocated, never acknowledged as anything more than a given. So, when Dorian and Xantha stood there, papers in hand, telling me I was being evicted from my own home, the place I had poured my life into, the place Thomas and I had built our dreams, it wasn't just the house. It was the culmination of 50 years of quiet suffering, of being taken for granted, of being used, of being treated as a resource rather than a person. It was the final, undeniable proof that their love for me was conditional, entirely dependent on what I could provide. And in that moment, all the pain, all the disappointment, all the unfulfilled longing for true family connection, it simply solidified into an unshakable resolve, hard as diamond. What would you have done? How much more could you take? I ask myself that sometimes, even now. How many more indignities could I have swallowed? How much more disrespect could I have endured? The answer, I realized in that searing moment, was none. Absolutely none. My patience, my generosity, my last shred of hope for true family connection, had finally run dry, evaporated under the harsh light of their greed. As Dorian and Xantha babbled on about the virtues of my new apartment and the fantastic market value of my ancestral home, I didn't say a word. I simply looked at them, my gaze steady, unwavering, seeing them for the first time with unclouded eyes. And I thought, this is it. This is the end of my quiet suffering. This is where I take my life back. The silence in the room stretched, thick and uncomfortable, broken only by their nervous chatter, their attempts to fill the void of my uncharacteristic stillness. They must have sensed something was different, a subtle shift in the air, but they couldn't quite put their finger on it. They just saw an old woman, looking a bit stunned. They probably thought I was finally giving in, finally accepting their benevolent plan. "Well, Mother?" Dorian prompted, holding out a pen, his voice tinged with impatience. "Shall we sign these, then? We can get the ball rolling. The movers are available as early as next week." I slowly shook my head. "No, Dorian," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, almost serene, as if a great calm had descended upon me. "I won't be signing anything." Xanda's practiced smile faltered, her perfect composure cracking. "But, Elara, darling, it's all arranged. It's for your own good. We've done all the hard work." "My good?" I finally spoke, my voice gaining strength, each word deliberate, precise. "You believe this is for my good? To displace me from my home, the place where I raised my son, where I shared 50 years of my life with your father, without a single consultation, and dump me into some sterile box 1,000 miles from my life, from my friends, from everything I know? You truly believe that?" Dorian bristled, his face reddening. "Mother, don't be dramatic. It's perfectly respectable. Many people move to assisted living. And we're doing this because we care about you. We're worried." "Care about me?" I chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that surprised even myself. It was the sound of a long-held illusion finally shattering. "You care about my assets. You care about what you can liquidate, what you can gain from my life, from my late husband's legacy. You've never cared about me, Dorian. Not truly. Not in the way a son should care for his mother. Not in the way a daughter-in-law should respect her husband's family." Their faces hardened. The mask of concern dropped entirely, replaced by irritation, defensiveness, and pure, unadulterated anger. The raw entitlement they usually hid beneath a veneer of charm was now laid bare. "This is ridiculous, Elara," Xanda snapped, her voice losing its sweetness, becoming sharp and brittle. "You're being incredibly ungrateful. After all we've done for you. All the emotional support, the family dinners, the children's visits. All you've done for me?" I asked, my voice rising slightly, the years of suppressed emotion finally beginning to crack the surface, like ice breaking on a winter lake. "My dear, I think you've confused the roles. For decades, I have been your personal bank. I have funded your lavish lifestyle, your sprawling house, your luxury cars, your children's elite education. I have been the silent financial backbone of your entire existence, ensuring you never wanted for anything, shielding you from the harsh realities of earning your own way. And in return, I have received nothing but dismissiveness, disrespect, and now, an eviction notice from my own home." Dorian's face turned a deeper shade of crimson. "That's not fair, Mother. We appreciate everything you've done. We just thought it was how things were meant to be." "Do you?" I scoffed, a bitter taste in my mouth. "Do you truly? Or do you just see me as an endless supply of money? Something to be milked until there's nothing left? A cash cow to be exploited?" I stood up, pushing past them, my movement slow but deliberate, walking towards the large, bay window that overlooked the sprawling gardens. My gardens. My home. Every tree, every bush, every stone bench held a piece of my soul. "Get out," I said, my voice barely audible, but firm, imbued with an authority they hadn't heard from me in years. Dorian looked bewildered, genuinely shocked. "Mother, what are you talking about? We're here to help you. Get out," I repeated, turning to face them, my gaze unwavering, cold as winter ice. "Take your papers, take your false concern, and leave my house. Now." They hesitated, probably wondering if I was having some kind of breakdown, if this was just a momentary lapse into senility. But the cold certainty in my eyes, the steel in my posture, must have conveyed the message. With a frustrated huff, Dorian snatched the papers off the desk. Xanda gave me a venomous look, her socialite smile completely gone, replaced by a sneer. "You'll regret this, Elara," she hissed, before turning on her heel and marching out. Dorian followed, muttering something under his breath about unreasonable old women and ingratitude. The moment the front door clicked shut, the carefully constructed composure I had maintained crumbled. My legs felt weak, and I sank into the nearest armchair, a plush velvet piece that had always been Thomas's favorite, my heart pounding like a drum against my ribs. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, but beneath it, a strange sense of clarity emerged. It was over. The charade, the quiet enablement, the desperate hope for a connection that would never come. It was truly, finally, over. A profound, almost spiritual calm settled over me. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the house a welcome balm after their toxic presence. My mind was racing, but not with panic. With purpose. I thought of Thomas, of his wisdom, his foresight. He had made sure I had control, knowing what kind of man Dorian could become if left unchecked, if simply handed everything without earning it. And now, it was time to exercise that control. Not for revenge, not truly. But for justice. For myself. For my dignity. And yes, for them, too, in a twisted way. To force them to face the reality they had so long avoided. To force them to grow up. I stood up, walked to my study, and picked up the phone. My hand didn't even tremble this time. I knew exactly who I needed to call. Mr. Henderson. My longtime solicitor, a man who had known Thomas for decades and had handled all our family's legal affairs with utmost discretion and integrity. He was a man I trusted implicitly, a quiet, steadfast rock in a world of shifting sands. Mr. Henderson, I said, when his assistant, a kindly woman named Margaret, put me through. It's Alara Vance. I need to see you. Immediately. It's of the utmost urgency. And I need to discuss my entire estate. He sounded concerned, of course, knowing my age and the recent events, the subtle hints I had dropped over the years. Of course, Mrs. Vance. How soon can you be here? I can clear my schedule. I'll be there in an hour, I replied, my voice firm, resolute. The drive to his office was a blur, the familiar streets passing by unnoticed. My mind was already meticulously planning, constructing the edifice of my new future. I wasn't just going to cut them off. That would be too simple, too easily reversed, leaving a loophole for future manipulation. No, I was going to ensure that not a single penny of Thomas's hard-earned legacy, or my careful management of it, would ever touch their entitled hands again. It had to be absolute, unequivocal. When I sat across from Mr. Henderson in his elegant, leather-bound office, surrounded by shelves of ancient law books and the scent of old paper and polished wood, he looked at me with a worried expression. Mrs. Vance, are you quite all right? Your voice on the phone, it sounded very firm. I'm perfectly all right, Mr. Henderson, I assured him, though my heart was still thumping with a quiet excitement, a sense of purpose. In fact, I've never been clearer. I need to make some immediate and irrevocable changes to my estate. I want to reroute all my assets, every single one, into an irrevocable trust for charitable foundations. Mr. Henderson's eyebrows shot up, disappearing almost entirely behind his receding hairline. His calm, professional demeanor wavered slightly. All of them, Mrs. Vance? Every asset? Your personal accounts, your investment portfolios, the real estate, this house, the land, everything? Every last cent, Mr. Henderson. Every painting, every piece of jewelry, every share, every bond, every property. And I want it done in such a way that it cannot be contested, not by Dorian, not by Xantha, not by anyone. I want it set up so that Dorian, Xantha, or any of their descendants, can never, ever, access these funds. Ever. Not a single penny. He was a shrewd man, Mr. Henderson. He saw the fire in my eyes, the steel in my resolve. He also knew the history, the quiet complaints I had occasionally made over the years about Dorian's spending habits, the thinly veiled hints of Xantha's avarice. He knew this wasn't a rash decision, but a culmination. Mrs. Vance, this is a very significant decision. Are you absolutely certain? This would mean cutting off all financial support, completely. For their house, their children's education. Absolutely certain, I confirmed, my voice unwavering, resonating with conviction. This includes their mortgage payments, which I have been quietly covering for years. Their car payments. Even the tuition fees for the children. Every single financial lifeline they have come to depend on from me will be severed. Permanently. And I want it done immediately. The mortgage payment for their house is due next week. The children's tuition is due at the start of next term. I want the trust established and the funds transferred before any of those payments are due to process. I want them to feel the immediate impact of their choices. Mr. Henderson leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face, his fingers steepled. This is highly unusual, Mrs. Vance. It will be complex, requiring careful legal navigation, but given your clear instructions and the legal framework, it is certainly feasible. And it will have significant repercussions. For Dorian and Xanda, particularly. Their entire lifestyle will be impacted. Let them have repercussions, Mr. Henderson, I said, feeling a strange lightness in my chest, as if a great weight had been lifted, a century of burdens finally unshouldered. Perhaps for the first time in their lives, they will have to face the consequences of their actions. Perhaps for the first time, they will have to truly work, truly earn their way. And perhaps, just perhaps, they will learn the value of something other than inherited wealth. The value of resilience, of self-reliance. He nodded slowly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. Very well, Mrs. Vance. I will begin the process immediately. It will require a few signatures today, and some time for the transfers to clear, but the irrevocable trust can be established quite quickly, making the intention clear and legally binding. We will ensure there is no avenue for contestation. I felt a profound sense of calm settle over me as I signed the stacks of papers he presented, my hand steady, my resolve firm. It wasn't about malice, not really. It was about self-preservation. It was about reclaiming my dignity. It was about saying, finally, enough is enough. And as I left Mr. Henderson's office, stepping out into the late afternoon sun, I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I had done the right thing. The calm before the storm, they call it. And boy, was a storm brewing. I could almost taste the electricity in the air. Of course, my decision was going to have consequences, wasn't it? I knew it, deep down. You don't pull the rug out from under someone's entire life without expecting a reaction. What I didn't anticipate was the speed, or the sheer, unadulterated fury of their response. It was as though I had poked a sleeping dragon, and it had woken with a vengeance. It started subtly, as these things often do, with a ripple before the tsunami. A few days after my visit to Mr. Henderson, my phone rang. It was Dorian. His voice was unusually strained, lacking its usual carefree arrogance. Mother? Everything all right? I'm trying to pay the electricity bill, and my card's been declined. Just a glitch, I'm sure, but it's never happened before. Could you just check your end? Is it, Dorian? I replied, my voice deliberately neutral, almost bored. Perhaps you should check your own bank account. And your primary mortgage holder. He mumbled something, clearly irritated, a low growl of frustration. Look, can you just transfer a few thousand? We're a bit tight this month. You know, with the kids' school fees coming up, and Xanda just bought a new, well, just send it, okay? We'll sort out the glitch later. He was clearly accustomed to this arrangement, the expectation of immediate assistance. No, Dorian, I said, my voice firm, allowing no room for negotiation or plea. I won't be sending any more money. Not for the electricity, not for the mortgage, not for the cars, and certainly not for your children's tuition. There was a stunned, incredulous silence on the other end, so profound I could almost hear his mind struggling to process my words. Then, a sharp intake of breath, a sudden, panicked gasp. What? What are you talking about? Mother, are you feeling all right? Is this about the house? Are you upset about that? It's about a great many things, Dorian. But yes, it is also about the house. And about your persistent, frankly disgusting, sense of entitlement. My patience has run out. You can't be serious. You can't just cut us off. We rely on that. The children, what about the children? His voice rose to a panicked shout, laced with genuine fear now, not just irritation. The reality was beginning to sink in. The children, Dorian, have two perfectly capable parents who should, by all rights, be providing for them. Not their elderly grandmother. My funds are no longer available to you. Or to Xantha. Or to your children. I have made arrangements for the entirety of my estate. It is now in an irrevocable charitable trust. You will not receive a single penny, now or ever. It is legally beyond my reach, and therefore, yours. The gasp on the other end was almost comical, a strangled sound of utter disbelief. A charitable trust? Are you insane? That's our inheritance. That's my inheritance. Father wanted me to have that. He built that for me. Your father wanted you to be a responsible, hard-working man, Dorian. Not a parasite living off the legacy of others. He made sure I had control over his fortune precisely because he knew you lacked his discipline. And I have exercised that control in accordance with his true wishes, which was to see his wealth do good, not enable indolence. You are no longer my financial responsibility. None of you are. You are on your own. I hung up before he could respond, my hand shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the raw power of the moment, the finality of my decision. I knew what was coming. The calm was about to break. And I was ready for it. And break it did. Within hours, my phone began to ring incessantly. Calls from Dorian, then Xantha, then even the headmaster of the children's elite school, Mr. Fitzwilliam, politely inquiring about the outstanding tuition, his voice laced with an unmistakable undertone of concern for his institution's finances. I ignored them all. I let them ring, letting their desperation mount. I needed them to feel the immediate, crushing reality of their situation, to truly understand the depth of the chasm I had opened beneath their feet. The true climax, however, came 2 days later. It was late afternoon, and I was in my study, reading a novel, the silence of the house a peaceful counterpoint to the storm brewing outside its walls. Suddenly, the doorbell exploded into a furious, prolonged buzz, desperate and angry. Then, banging. Loud, insistent banging, vibrating through the solid oak. My front door, usually a bastion of quiet dignity, was under siege, a pounding that echoed the frantic rage within. I walked slowly to the door, my heart steady, my resolve firm. I knew who it was. And I was ready. I even felt a strange sense of anticipation, of grim satisfaction. When I opened it, Dorian and Xantha stood there, their faces contorted with a mixture of rage, desperation, and utter disbelief. Xantha's perfect makeup was smudged, her expensive hair disheveled, as if she had been pulling at it. Dorian looked like he hadn't slept in days, his eyes bloodshot, his clothes wrinkled. They looked like two spoiled children who had just had their favorite toy snatched away. "Mother! What have you done?" Dorian roared, his voice hoarse, pushing past me into the foyer without waiting for an invitation, his shoes tracking mud onto my pristine Persian rug. Xantha followed, her voice a shrill whine, bordering on a scream. "Ilara, this is insane. Our cards are all being declined. The mortgage company just called. They said they haven't received payment. What kind of sick game are you playing?" "No game, Xantha," I said calmly, closing the door behind them, the click a definitive, resonant sound. "Just reality. The reality you have so carefully avoided for decades." "Reality?" Dorian shrieked, his voice cracking with panic. "You've ruined us. Do you have any idea what you've done? Our accounts are frozen. We can't access anything. The cars are about to be repossessed. The school just threatened to expel the children. Our entire life is falling apart. That's hardly my concern, is it?" I replied, walking into the living room and sitting gracefully on the sofa, gesturing for them to take the armchairs. They didn't. They just stood there, towering over me, their faces red with fury, vibrating with a desperate energy. "How can you say that?" Xantha cried, tears streaming down her face, though I suspected they were more from frustration and self-pity than genuine sadness for her predicament. "These are your grandchildren. Your blood. Do you want them to be thrown out of school? To become pariahs? To have no future? Perhaps they will learn humility," I suggested softly, my gaze unwavering. "Something neither of you has ever managed to grasp. Perhaps they will learn the true value of an education, not just its price tag." "You are a cruel, heartless woman." Dorian spat, pointing a trembling finger at me, his voice trembling with a venom I had never heard directed at me before. "After everything we've done for you. After all our visits, our concern, trying to get you into a safer place." "Oh, the concern," I scoffed, a genuine, mirthless laugh escaping my lips. "The concern that came wrapped in eviction papers. The concern that was solely focused on liquidating my assets for your next grand scheme, your next fleeting indulgence. You want to talk about cruel, Dorian? You tried to kick your elderly mother out of her home. You stole my peace, my dignity, my very sense of self, for decades, with your endless demands and your utter lack of gratitude, your casual disregard for my existence. But it's our inheritance." Xantha wailed, collapsing onto an armchair, burying her face in her hands. "It's what Thomas wanted for us. You're defying his wishes. He built that empire for his son. Thomas trusted me with his legacy, Xantha. He gave me the power to ensure it was used wisely, to perpetuate good, not to fuel the profligacy of the undeserving. And believe me, he would be appalled by what you have become. He would be disgusted by your greed, your laziness, your utter contempt for the value of honest work, your belief that wealth is merely a birthright, not a responsibility." Dorian paced frantically, a caged animal. "This is a mistake, Mother. A terrible mistake. Just call your lawyer, tell him to reverse it. We can talk about this. We can work something out. Please, we can change." "There's nothing to reverse, Dorian. The trust is irrevocable. The funds are legally out of my hands, and out of yours. Forever. They are now dedicated to causes that truly need assistance, not to funding the lavish, undeserved lifestyle of two utterly spoiled adults. Thomas's legacy will do immense good in the world, as he would have truly wanted." His jaw dropped. He stopped pacing, frozen in place. "Irrevocable? You mean it's gone? All of it? Everything? Every last cent that you believed was your birthright, yes. It's gone. To charities that feed the hungry, house the homeless, educate children who actually yearn for knowledge and have no means to acquire it, provide medical care to the neglected. Perhaps you could volunteer there, Dorian. You might learn something about real struggle, real need." He slumped into the armchair, his face ashen, defeated. Xantha stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and pure, unadulterated hatred. The mask was completely off. "You witch," she whispered, her voice devoid of its usual syrupy sweetness, raw with fury. "You cold, calculating witch. You've ruined us. You've destroyed our lives. Our children's lives." "No, my dear," I said, a faint smile playing on my lips, a genuine, unburdened smile. "You destroyed your own lives. I merely stopped enabling you to do so. You had every opportunity. Every advantage. You were given the world on a silver platter. But you chose to squander it. You chose to be dependent, to be ungrateful, to be disrespectful. And now, you face the consequences of those choices. As all adults eventually must." Dorian finally looked up, his eyes pleading, a last desperate gamble. "Mother, please. We'll change. We'll get jobs. We'll be better. Just give us a chance. We can't lose everything. What will people say?" "What people say, Dorian, is a burden you will now have to carry. As for changing, I sincerely hope you do. Not for my money, but for yourselves. for your children. But that change must come from within you, not from an expectation of my endless generosity. My chapter of financial support for you is permanently closed. There is nothing left for you here. I stood up, signaling the end of the conversation, the finality of my decree. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a quiet evening planned. And I suggest you go home and start planning your own future. One that you actually have to work for. One that you build for yourselves. They sat there for a moment, stunned into silence, utterly defeated. Then, slowly, Dorian rose, his shoulders slumped, his entire posture radiating despair. Xantha, still weeping quietly, a thin, pathetic sound, followed him. They walked out of my house, defeated, broken, leaving behind a silence that felt not empty, but finally, wonderfully, free. The air seemed lighter, cleaner. I had, at long last, cut the cords. And the sound of them snapping was the most beautiful sound I had heard in decades. The weight of their parasitic existence had finally been lifted from my shoulders. So, what happened next? Oh, my dear, it was quite a spectacle, though I was careful to keep my distance. I heard things, of course. News travels fast in a town like ours, especially when it involves prominent families and sudden shifts in fortune. The whispers began immediately. Dorian and Xantha's lives, as I had predicted, descended into financial chaos with astonishing speed. The mortgage on their sprawling house, which I had been covering for years, was immediately in default. They scrambled, trying to find a loan, trying to beg, borrow, or steal from friends and family, but their reputation as entitled spendthrifts preceded them. They had always been quick to flash my money and host extravagant parties, but slow to offer help or genuine friendship when others were in need. So, when the well ran dry, so did their friends. The phone call stopped, the invitation ceased. Their carefully constructed social facade crumbled. Their luxury cars were repossessed within weeks. I heard Dorian had a public meltdown in the dealership parking lot when they came to take his fancy sports car, screaming obscenities. Xantha, apparently, had to take taxis everywhere, which, for a woman obsessed with appearances and status, was a fate worse than death. She even tried to borrow my old, perfectly functional car, but I politely declined, citing its age and fragility. The biggest blow, though, was the children's schooling. With the tuition unpaid, they were, indeed, unceremoniously expelled from their elite private school, mid-term. I heard the headmaster, Mr. Fitzwilliam, was quite firm, especially after Xantha's dramatic scene in his office, where she reportedly threatened legal action and then burst into hysterics. My grandchildren, poor things, had to be enrolled in the local public school. I felt a pang of sadness for them, truly. They were innocent in all of this, caught in the crossfire of their parents' greed. But I also knew, deep down, that a dose of reality might actually do them some good. Perhaps they would learn resilience, and the value of education for its own sake, not just for the status it conferred upon their parents. Dorian, forced to finally get a job, ended up taking a low-level sales position, something he openly mocked as beneath him, a temporary setback. Xantha, having no marketable skills beyond social climbing and spending, tried to start an online boutique selling overpriced, mediocre fashion, which, predictably, failed miserably within months, accumulating more debt. They had to sell their house, taking a significant loss because they were desperate, forced to accept the first lowball offer. They moved into a much smaller, far less glamorous home in a less desirable neighborhood, a stark contrast to their former mansion. The grand schemes, the mega mansion, the risky investments, all of it evaporated like mist. They were, for the first time in their adult lives, truly on their own, staring at the raw, unvarnished face of financial independence. Did they try to come back? Oh, absolutely. The pleading, the threats, the emotional manipulation, it all continued for months. They'd send desperate text messages at all hours, leave tearful, angry voicemails, even try to show up at my door again, though I instructed Mr. Henderson to send them a legal notice if they continued to trespass. But I was unwavering. My resolve had been forged in the fire of their betrayal, and it was unyielding. Mr. Henderson had ensured the trust was ironclad, impenetrable. There was simply nothing more they could extract from me. Eventually, their efforts dwindled, their desperation giving way to a grudging, resentful acceptance. The well was truly and irrevocably dry. And me? What happened to my life? Well, my dear, it became wonderfully, beautifully free. For the first time in decades, I wasn't constantly worried about their latest crisis, their next demand, their dismissive remarks, their looming presence. The weight of their endless need, which had pressed down on my shoulders for so long, simply lifted. It was like breathing clean, fresh air after being trapped in a dusty, airless room, suffocated by expectations. I felt lighter, more vibrant, truly alive for the first time in years. I started doing things I had always wanted to do but felt I couldn't, either because of their incessant demands on my time or simply the emotional drain they caused. I rediscovered my love for painting, something I had pursued passionately in my youth but abandoned after Thomas's death, feeling as though joy was an indulgence I could no longer afford. I set up an easel in my sunlit conservatory, where the light was perfect, and spent hours there, lost in colors and light, creating vibrant landscapes and portraits. I joined a local book club, something Xantha had always sneered at as too pedestrian and for boring old women. I made wonderful new friends, women my age who shared my interests, who genuinely listened, who offered empathy and laughter, and who didn't ask for a penny, only for genuine connection. I even volunteered at the local animal shelter, finding immense joy in caring for creatures who offered unconditional love. I finally fulfilled an old dream of traveling to Japan. Thomas and I had always planned to go, had a whole itinerary planned, but life, and Dorian's increasing needs, had always gotten in the way. I went with a small, intimate tour group, and it was glorious. The cherry blossoms, delicate and ethereal, the ancient temples radiating serenity, the quiet elegance of the tea ceremonies, it was everything I had imagined and more. And for the first time I experienced these joys without the underlying anxiety of wondering how Dorian would react to my spending, or whether Xantha would demand an equally extravagant trip for herself as recompense. The freedom was intoxicating. My ancestral home, the very place they had tried to evict me from, became truly mine again. It wasn't just a house, it was a testament to my resilience, to my reclaiming of my own life. I walked through its halls with a renewed sense of purpose, tending to my garden, entertaining my new friends, living life on my own terms, filled with a quiet, profound peace. The greatest gift you can give someone, I realized, isn't money, but the opportunity to stand on their own 2 feet. To face life's challenges, to learn resilience, and to discover their own strength. Dorian and Xantha may have lost a fortune, but perhaps, just perhaps, they gained something far more valuable, the chance to build a life based on their own efforts, not on the unearned wealth of others. And I gained my life back. My peace. My dignity. My joy. And the quiet, profound satisfaction of knowing that Thomas's legacy was finally doing the good he had always intended, for those who truly needed it, not for those who merely felt entitled to it. My life, at last, was truly mine. That was my story. Our channel is full of life lessons like this one, stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances and finding strength they never knew they had. If you found my story impactful, please consider subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos. We share new stories every week. What do you think? Did I do the right thing? Was it too harsh, or was it the only way? Share your thoughts with me in the comments below. I'll be reading all of them. Thank you for listening.